Hello, and today I am once again doing something different from my usual Let's Plays and drum covers. This video is heavily inspired by Yakuza in the West, A Dragon's Resurrection by Kamurocho Bros. Oh, and this video only contains very light spoilers for these games listed. Let's get started. On the 19th of September 2017, I released the first of two videos, called Pleb Plays Yakuza. Back in 2017, I still went by my Xbox gamer tag, the Plebby Pleb. I was 20 years old and decided to check out the Yakuza series by emulating 2005's Yakuza. Sadly, in the video I never mentioned why I started playing Yakuza in the first place. The most that I'd mentioned was that I'd never played Yakuza before and wanted to try out the game. And I had decided to do a series on Yakuza because I'd already played Mafia 2 before, so playing Yakuza would have been more fun for me. I also don't remember why I stopped playing Yakuza at this time. I would imagine I was busy after getting a job at Blackpool Pleasure Beach as an arcade attendant. I didn't have a car or even a push bike, so I'd walk around 10 to 12 miles a day just from walking to work, walking around work, and then walking home. So I imagine I was just too invested with work and life stuff, and it wasn't until 2018 that I dipped my toes back into the series. In 2018, I was working as a ride operator on a pier in Blackpool. During this time, I was working anywhere from 60 hours on average per week to as many as 84 hours a week at its peak. I was earning a lot of money, more than I was ever used to having, and so I decided now was the perfect time to buy some games from series I'd heard of but never played. So I bought a few games that year, including Kingdom Come Deliverance, which I loved, Persona 5, which I adored, Marvel's Spider-Man, which I loved and was fully aware of, and Yakuza 0, which, well, we'll get into that. I bought PS4 on a whim so I could check out the latest Spider-Man game, as well as the Persona and Yakuza series. I played Spider-Man and loved it. I also checked out Kingdom Come Deliverance on a whim after my friend said to me, "Hey, this game just came out, I think you'd like it." I loved it. In fact, KCD2 comes out in February, and I'm extremely excited for it. I even named my cat Henry after Henry of Skalitz. During that time I also bought Persona 5, I fell in love with its turn-based combat, the story, the whole thing. I put 24 hours into that game in 2 days. But before I started Persona 5, I started Yakuza 0. Yakuza 0 was a really fun game, but it just wasn't clicking with me. So I took a break when I got to a tedious bit where I had to buy a bunch of alcohol for a bunch of homeless men. I wasn't enjoying the dated aspects of the game, and while I really did like Kiryu and the combat, sadly I just got obsessed with Persona 5 and I moved away from Yakuza 0 and never got back around to it. And that was until July 24th, 2020. With the COVID-19 pandemic breaking out and lockdown being enforced, and the fact that I'd been evicted from my flat after being unable to find work in 2019, I moved back in with my estranged mum and found myself stuck indoors. It turned out not to be so bad though, as I was an introverted person and I had no real qualms about staying inside playing video games, so I decided to check out Xbox's Game Pass on my Xbox One X, and on July 24th, 2020, I decided to try and play the Yakuza 0 again. Now that it was on my preferred console was on Game Pass, I figured, even if I get bored again, it has Xbox achievements, so I'll power through and at least get the achievement for completing the story. So, I started replaying it, and it finally clicked. I loved it, and I mean loved this game. Everything from the story about Kazuma Kiryu, a young 20-year-old, low-ranking Yakuza member, who is wrongly accused of murder in Kamurocho, Tokyo, as well as Goro Majima, a mid-20s former Yakuza member turned manager from the cabaret club in Sontembori, Osaka. Yakuza 0 had interesting characters, a great story about a plot of land worth billions of yen during the Japanese economic miracle of the 1980s, and, well, fantastic gameplay. The combat was really fun and in-depth, only getting more and more interesting the more I leveled up Kiryu and Majima. The side content also blew me away, not with just the sheer amount of stuff to do, but with the amount of effort poured into making all of it pop. Many of these minigames were tied to the game's sub-story systems, which usually involved Kiryu finding themselves in increasingly wacky situations, such as winning a chicken named Nugget, who later becomes one of your best real estate managers in the Estate Royale minigame, after befriending and defeating Emery's 10-pin bowling challenge of achieving a turkey. And you would do anything from helping a production crew finish producing a show by stepping in as a stand-in producer, to helping Miracle Johnson, shoot a music video involving zombies, and much, much more. In short, the game is filled to the brim with these insanely silly and hilarious sub-stories, which were completely different in a very serious tone of the main story. A story which almost made me cry several times with how emotional it can get. This is something many games get wrong. Games like Saints Row, when it would put wacky things in a wacky world, which many people loved, but I didn't. The reason for that, I don't know. I guess I just don't like wacky things in a wacky world. I don't find that funny. I really enjoy British humour, like Hot Fuzz. I really enjoy dry delivery of jokes, the absurdistness of humour in Airplane. Wacky things happening in seemingly serious worlds, or jokes delivered so seriously, you'd almost take them seriously if it wasn't for how ridiculous and funny the jokes were. In short, Yakuza 0 did comedy right. The main story is extremely serious, but the side content is silly as fuck. So much work went into these sub-stories that they even made unique theme songs, including this weirdly fantastic track that plays when delivering a pizza. To put it simply, the game was incredibly good from start to finish. It finally clicked and it had become one of my favourite games of all time. From there, I jumped into Yakuza Kiwami, a remake of the OG Yakuza game which released on the PS2 all the way back in 2005, followed by Yakuza Kiwami 2, a remake of Yakuza 2 from 2006. Actually, you know what? No, that isn't true. After completing Yakuza Kiwami, I started Yakuza Like a Dragon, aka Yakuza 7, on the 28th of November 2020, 9 days before I started playing Yakuza Kiwami 2, which is very different from the other Yakuza games.
Let's make it epic.
On the 28th of November 2020, I started playing Yakuza Like a Dragon. It was the latest Yakuza game at the time, and the first to be known as Like a Dragon, aka Ryuga Gotoku, as it was known in Japan. It was also very different from previous Yakuza games, which aside from Dead Souls were all beat-em-ups and brawlers. Think Fighting Force or Bully. Instead, Yakuza Like a Dragon was a turn-based JRPG. Think Dragon Quest or Persona. It was also the first mainline Yakuza game to fully switch the main character. Throughout the series you could play as many characters, but Kiryu had always been playable in all of them. In this game you never play as Kiryu. Instead you play as an absolutely fantastic and lovable dumbass, Ichiban Kasuga. Ichiban was an orphan raised by Jiro Kasuga, the manager of Shangri-La, a soap line in Kamurocho. As an escape from the drama of the real world, Ichiban spent most of his time playing Dragon Quest in the back office of the soapland, often imagining one day that he'd become a hero, like the protagonist of his favourite video game. Yakuza Like a Dragon simply blew me away. The story is incredibly good, the characters are fantastically written, the combat, while flawed, was very, very good. The job system acting as classes was an absolutely fantastic idea. Instead of having JRPG classes like fighters, mages, etc., the game utilizes Ichiban's unemployment as a game mechanic, such as a musician or a chef, with very over-the-top special abilities that fit perfectly into Yakuza's more comedic elements. It also added a ton of fantastic minigames such as Dragon Kart, Business Management, Conquest, vintage theatre, and the vocation school. All of these, especially the conquest and business management minigames, were incredibly fun and great additions to the series. In short, it was a near-perfect game. It, like Yakuza 0, had great gameplay, a fantastic story, and a ton of side content. Personally, I think Yakuza Like a Dragon might be my favourite game in the series. It's near flawless with only a few nitpicks here and there. Thankfully, the spoilers for Yakuza 2, 3, 4, and 5 and 6 were very light in this game, so I didn't end up going into any of the other Yakuza games knowing anything I should have, other than that certain characters were still alive. Shortly after beating Like a Dragon, which I 100%ed the achievements of, I started Yakuza Kiwami 2. It was the 7th of December 2020, and I was now being introduced to my second Yakuza game in the new Dragon engine, the first being Yakuza Like a Dragon. The thing is though, due to this new engine, the combat was very different to Yakuza 0, and the game felt much more modern. A better saving system, seamless entering of buildings and combat, with beautiful, and I mean extremely beautiful graphics. Now sadly on console the game was locked to 30 FPS due to this graphical upgrade. This would be fixed with the Xbox Series X, PS5 and PC versions. As I got to this game in December, I had luckily saved up and bought an Xbox Series X by then. But back to Kiwami 2. Kiwami 2 was really good. It had a great story, a fantastic new combat system that at first I didn't actually like. But after some time, I started to see the great parts of it. Just the way that the combat felt, the impact, the way enemies would block and your fist would bounce off, breaking your combo. A lot of people were annoyed by that stuff. I actually really liked it. I felt like I was in a proper fight. Also, I nearly forgot to mention the ragdoll physics. And the ragdoll physics in this game are hysterical. And that's not to mention the fact that the game had tons of side content, as always. For instance, the bouncer missions, which were a fantastic way of showing off what the engine has to offer. It's easily one of my favourites in the series, and shortly after I started my playthrough of Kiwami 2, a new reveal from Ryuga Gotoku was made at the Game Awards.
Yakuza 3. As you can tell, I could not wait for Yakuza 3 to come out on Xbox, if it ever comes out on Xbox.
Oh my god! Oh my god! Yes! Yes! No way! No way!
On the 10th of December 2020, Yakuza 3, 4, 5 and 6 were announced for the Xbox Series X. Like many Yakuza fans, I was super excited, and the timing couldn't have been better. So once I'd finished playing through Yakuza Kiwami 2, it was time to jump into the PS3 era of the Yakuza games. Starting with one of the most divisive games in the fandom, Yakuza 3. I began Yakuza 3 on the 7th of February 2021. Yakuza 3 takes place in Okinawa, where Kiryu is retired from the Yakuza, for realsies this time, to take care of his adopted daughter Haruka and orphans at the Morning Glory Orphanage, which was mistranslated to Sunshine Orphanage in the original PS3 localization, due to Morning Glory in English having a very different meaning than intended. This led to confusion in the fandom, as Sunshine is both a hostess club and an orphanage where Kiryu used to live, and this even confused me when I was doing research for this video, because I'd forgotten that this was even a problem in this game. No, Morning Glory is not the same building as Sunshine. And there's a continuity error in the series where it's said that Kiryu took over Morning Glory, but in later games it was said that he started Morning Glory. Anyway, why am I talking about this? So Yakuza 3 is a very, very dated game from 2009. The combat, while better than the original Yakuza 2's combat, still feels flat in places, such as certain heat actions lacking impact. The story was also divisive among fans, as many felt it focused too much on the orphanage side of Kiryu's life, while others like me found that to be their favourite part of Yakuza 3. Personally, I felt connected to Morning Glory. I cared about it, and I really wanted it and the children who lived there to flourish. And yes, I picked that word on purpose because in the name of the orphanage is morning glory, which is slang for waking up with an erection, because in the dictionary definition of flourish includes the words grow and vigorous. Get it? Grow and vigorous? Like an erect penis? But despite its flaws, Yakuza 3 was a very fun game. Sure, it was dated as hell, but the story was good, the combat was fun, even if many in the community would refer to it as Blockuza, because of how much the Yakuza would block all your attacks, but I enjoyed it a lot. There's not much else to say other than the game was filled to the brim with content. Originally in the PS3, it was released with missing bits, like the quiz and the hostess clubs were gone. This was because the games just weren't selling well in the West. Yakuza 2 only sold 40,000 copies, so it was a battle for Yakuza 3 to be released in the West in the first place. Overall, Yakuza 3, like I said, was a very fun game. Dated as hell, but hey, what do we expect? It's a PS3 game. Let's move on to the next game. Yakuza 4. I started Yakuza 4 on the 26th of March 2021. The game started with a new protagonist named Shun Akiyama, and like the rest of the fandom, I really like him. In fact, I liked all of the protagonists in this game. The story was good for the most part, it introduced a ton of very likable characters and had great gameplay. I don't have much to say about this game other than that I enjoyed it, and it made me laugh a lot. I don't remember a ton from the game though, unfortunately, probably because I only spent about 11 days playing it off and on before I completed the story, but I remembered enjoying it. I remember liking a lot of the characters from it, such as Hana, Tanemura, and Saejima. That said though, there was that one really uncomfortable and poorly aged scene involving Saejima that I probably blame on Japanese culture of the mid to late 2000s, but I think that's really one of the only things I could complain about other than some of the same issues that Yakuza 3 had. But that's about it. I enjoyed the game, it wasn't anything special now. An above average game with a decent story, good characters, and just overall fun. Even if it wasn't super memorable, I enjoyed it. It is kinda sad now that I can't really remember much from this game at all. I even did some research into the plot and I was like, I don't remember this. I think it's because at this time I was just going through the paces of playing them, and again, I had fun. These games just simply weren't as good as the later games, and honestly, it's kinda to be expected. Next, I started Yakuza 5 on the 8th of April 2021, 2 days after beating Yakuza 4. And this game is what many consider to be one of the best in the series, and for the first act of the game, I agree. I really enjoyed the first act of this game. I thought it was fantastic. Some of the best, most engaging storytelling of the entire series up to this point was in this act. Unfortunately, it didn't last. Act 2 takes place with another character in another place and is very slow. Like, painfully slow. It had some really fun moments that I don't want to spoil with spoilers, as I've done my best to avoid doing this whole video, and I won't start here. So all I want to say is Act 2, I just personally was not enjoying it. I found it too long, too slow, and the dated aspects of the game and the design were just on full display here. Then on to Act 3, things got a bit more interesting with a huge gameplay shift. And then finally, Act 4, where we go back to Act 2 levels of quality, but to be honest, not as tedious. In short, the game tried to do a lot, and for me, it just didn't click. I felt like they tried to do too much, with too many characters and locations. I think that when they make a Kiwami version of this game in the Dragon Engine, it'd be a lot more fun. They can restructure the gameplay a bit, improving many of the faults of the original. The game has some of my favourite jokes and comedic moments throughout the entire series, but overall, as a game, I just didn't really think it was very good. Many people love this game, and it's just never clicked for me outside of Act 1 and Act 3. There's a lot of good here, but it's also painfully clear to me that it was just a very dated game. It has good but a complex and confusing story. It has great characters even if the writing is a little shaky at times. And what I will say in its defense isn't the combat is fantastic. It's the same combat as Yakuza 0 when they took everything from 4 and revamped it, and if Yakuza 0 didn't exist, it would have had the best PS3 era combat of any Yakuza game. But Yakuza 0 took what Yakuza 5 did, and it improved it on every level. Do I think that Yakuza 5 is a bad game? No. Do I think it's a good game? It's hard to say. I think it's an okay game, but unfortunately for me, like I said, it just didn't click. So this is where we end the PS3 era of Yakuza. It was a bit of a shaky time, but I still had fun playing them. Of the three of them, my favourite was the Yakuza 3. The PS3 era really struggled in the West from what I've heard, and I really highly recommend Yakuza in the West, A Dragon's Resurrection by Kamurocho Bros. There's currently 3 parts out on YouTube with tons of interesting information about the early years of Yakuza in the West, such as how some of these games were almost never released in the EU or the US due to poor sales. So now with the PS3 era of Yakuza covered, it's time to move on to the PS4, Xbox One, and PC era, the Dragon Engine. Yakuza Kiwami was the last game to be made in the PS3 engine. Ryuga Gotoku announced Yakuza 6 and unveiled their fancy new engine. Yakuza 6 came out with new graphics, new combat, new character models, and a whole lot of improvements, such as seamless battle transitions, more accessibility options, snappier text box, the ability to enter stores and buildings without a loading screen, hilarious ragdoll physics, faster menus, better AI, better particle effects, better save system, better inventory system, destructible environments, and probably even more than that just not coming to mind. I know I said this before, but I just want to emphasize how big of an upgrade this engine was. And in short, I love the Dragon Engine. And Yakuza 6 had a bit of a tumble coming out of the gate. The game was the buggiest Yakuza I've ever played. And while it was more than playable and more polished than most games, it had a bit of wonkiness to it, especially in the physics. So, I started playing Yakuza 6 on the 19th of June 2021, and it was a great game. The story was hit or miss in places, but I was invested for the whole thing. Kiryu is the main protagonist again, and I was really glad that was the case. As much as I like the other protagonists from 4 and 5, Kiryu has just always been the strongest and most popular, outside of Majima and Yakuza 0. The game takes place in a new town, Onamichi. That may sound familiar if you watched Day 4 of Sea-Dog VA's third Cyclothon in 2024, as he stopped in that town with Chris and Vaughan, to end their day of cycling, but back to the game. The new town was a lot of fun to explore and introduce one of the best sub-stories RGG has ever made. I think those of you who have played Yakuza 6 know exactly which one I'm talking about. The sub-story was so popular that an outfit that you wear in that particular sub-story has appeared in many subsequent Yakuza games, including Yakuza Like a Dragon and Like a Dragon Gaiden. So Yakuza 6 had a decent story, great combat, and many improvements, and even had a bunch of new minigames, including a baseball minigame where instead of just hitting balls in a batting cage, you actually played matches of baseball. It was very RNG and frustrating at times, but it was one of my favourite parts in the game, even if it is a pain in the ass to progress at times. It also added another minigame in the form of a real-time RTS mode called Clan Creator. Some people, like me, liked it. Other people, like Raynar Vegas Jr., were not so fond of it. But anyway, let's move on. That's enough for Yakuza 6. Since I've already spoken about Yakuza Like a Dragon and Kiwami 2, both of which were in the Dragon Engine, I'll move on to 2 spin-offs before we move on to the final chapter of this video. In late April 2021, while I was playing Yakuza 6, another game by Ryuga Gotoku was ported to Xbox, and that game was Judgment. Judgment is a spin-off of Yakuza, where instead of playing as a Yakuza member, you instead play as a private detective and ex-lawyer, Takayuki Yagami, who begins investigating a strange local murder, leading him down a long, complicated case filled with twists and turns. Also, there was an achievement in that game to photograph a bunch of cats hidden throughout all the main story missions. It was a really good game. So what can I say about Judgment? Well, for starters, the combat is fantastic. And Yagami has a very different fighting style to Kiryu. Yagami is a much more technical fighter than Kiryu, using his pace and stamina to overwhelm opponents with a flurry of strikes, kicks and grapples, making up for his lack of strength. It also introduced a bunch of new minigames such as drone racing, a VR, not actually VR dice game that's sort of like Mario Party but Yakuza style, as well as this cool Dead Souls House of the Dead inspired arcade game. I had a lot of fun playing Judgment. A lot. It's one of my favourites of the series. It's got easily one of my favourite stories Ryuga Gotoku has ever made. I thought the villain was fantastic, I thought the writing throughout was incredible. It was just insanely well made. And I started Judgment on the 1st of May 2021. Like Yakuza 6, there was a big gap between the time I started it and finished it. I didn't finish Judgment until the 11th of December 2021. According to True Achievements, I started the game in May, but didn't complete Chapter 2 until the 30th of November. Oh wait, I think I remember now. In 2021, I got a job as a caravan cleaner, and a health condition that I'm still dealing with to this day popped up. It's called varicocele. It sucks. Google it at your own peril, and just be warned, if you do Google it, you're about to learn way too much about me. So after that long gap, I played it non-stop until I finished the story, and I was really into this game. So after that long gap, I played it non-stop until I finished the story. It won't come as a surprise to say, I was obsessed with this game. It was incredible. And like I said, this game had very few flaws. Other than that whole lethal damage system, I guess the only real big issue was the tedious tailing in stealth sections. But actually, you know what, let's get back to the positives. Because it had a ton of great side stuff that it added, like sub-story investigations, a friendship system like in Yakuza 0. You could even go on a few dates with characters. All in all, it's a great game, and it sold over 1 million copies. It also comes with a full English dub. It's one of my favourite Ryuga Gotoku games, and one of my favourite games of all time. So with Judgment complete, 10 days later on the 21st of December 2021, I decided to start the sequel, Lost Judgment. Lost Judgment really surprised me. It went somewhere unexpected. High school. After all these years, I finally got that bully itch scratched. In Lost Judgment, you are once again investigating a mysterious murder that this time takes you out of Kamurocho and places you in Ijincho, Yokohama. In this game, while juggling a difficult case of bullying, murder and revenge, you also have a bunch of new side stuff, including being the club manager for multiple school clubs that include robotics, dancing, esports, boxing, motorbikes, skateboarding, and more. It's easily my favourite aspect of this game, as each of the clubs have their own storylines and sub-stories. In my opinion, the best are the dancing, boxing and skateboarding clubs. Outside of this, the combat is somehow even better than Judgment's, with a couple of small yet game-changing combat changes that make the combat feel and flow so much better. It's easily my favourite Dragon Engine beat-em-up. It's addictively fun, and I had a ton of fun with the bosses in this game. I really hope we get a Judgment 3. There's been some drama with the lead actor's acting agency that has put plans on hold, but thankfully the series could still continue, but it would have to do without Yagami. And the way that they could continue is with Kaito. Kaito is your best friend and partner at the Yagami Detective Agency. He even got his own DLC called the Kaito Files, which is very good by the way. Overall, I love the game. I think Judgment has the better story, but Lost Judgment has an honestly great story, and the combat is just unrivaled. It's easily one of the best and most entertaining games I've ever played. I can't recommend it enough. I beat the story on the 13th of January 2022, and still in 2024, I sometimes think about replaying Lost Judgment. And you know what? I just might. I have a series on Like a Dragon Ishin. I'll put the link in the comments and the description. I went in completely blind, and it was a mixed experience. It's a remake of a game from 2014, and for that reason, when they made this game, they reused the original code rather than completely remake it. For this reason, the combat feels a little dated. Using weapons like swords in Yakuza has always felt a little stiff. And in a game where swords and guns are your main weapons, it took some adjusting. For some, they couldn't get past it. I imagine that's even truer for people who hadn't played a Yakuza game before and didn't realise it was a remake. Ryuga Gotoku also built this game in the Unreal Engine. While it did lead to some Unreal Engine jank, such as beautiful yet buggy lighting, it was worth it. Thanks to the experience they got from using the Unreal Engine, they were able to improve the lighting in their Dragon Engine, as for a long time, they had the strong belief that the Dragon Engine looked beautiful at night, but flat during the day. I did notice that after this game came out, Like a Dragon Gaiden looked incredible during the daytime compared to Yakuza Like a Dragon. After a while, I adapted to the combat and started to really enjoy it. The game also had a great story, which is set in the Edo period of Japan. It also had some really funny sub-stories. I can still hear people chanting Ijaneka, oi 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 in my head to this day. But the game's biggest fault is that it is unnecessarily grindy. It takes an insane amount of grind to get certain crafting material and to create every sword in the game. I just couldn't be bothered. The level of grind to 100% the achievements for this game was just too much for me. But then again, most Yakuza games are, because I refuse to play Mahjong. But this one really took the piss. That being said, I'm still very glad I played it. It was a ton of fun, and learning about Edo period Japan was surprisingly interesting. I hope that RGG makes another game in this era, or maybe even the Meiji era or something. I don't know. Just give me something from any era of Japan and I'll probably find it really interesting. I finished this game on the 8th of November 2023, right in time for the next game. Ah yes, another game I have a series on, link in the comments and description. And in a paradigm shift from Ishin, Like a Dragon Gaiden, the man who erased his name, is a very easy game to 100% on Xbox. In simple terms, it's a short game. It was originally meant to be part of an Infinite Wealth storyline, but director Masayoshi Yokoyama made a suggestion to the development team to expand Kazuma Kiryu's backstory between the events of Yakuza 6 and Yakuza Like a Dragon, rather than just making it an interlude for Infinite Wealth. So they thought about making it a DLC for Infinite Wealth, only to realise they could do a lot more with this than they originally thought. So in as little as 6 months, all the while they were co-developing Ishin Infinite Wealth, they managed to create Like a Dragon Gaiden, The Man Who Erased His Name. Now for a game made in 6 months, you might not expect it to be very good. Actually, it was very good. Now don't get me wrong, you can tell this game was made in 6 months. The story feels a bit wobbly in places, and it feels a lot flatter than many stories from the Yakuza series. But the final chapter was incredibly good writing, and made men and women all around the world shed tears for a fantastically written and acted finale. I honestly have to give RGG a clap for this game, because they somehow made this the best Colosseum gameplay of any Yakuza game. In every Yakuza game for the most part, there is a Colosseum mode, where you go into arena, you fight some dudes, and there's a bunch of special modes and different things that change the rule sets of each match you have. And they really revamped it in this one. Not only that, but they created a new fighting style, the agent style, where you could use a watch as like a Spider-Man-like web. It was fantastic, and very addictive to grab older people from a distance and fling them over your shoulder like they were a cigarette. Oh, did I mention they also give you exploding cigarettes? Because you're an agent. Yeah, it's really fun. They also brought back the pool minigame, billiards, and a couple of new karaoke songs. They also revived an old karaoke song called Like a Butterfly, which is sang extremely well in both the Japanese and English dub, by a new character that many, myself included, loved, called Akemi. In short, this game was a surprise. Not just because it meant that we got 3 Yakuza games within a year of each other, but also because we got an insanely fun game that gives us more time with Kiryu. And I really enjoyed this game. It took me roughly 43 hours to 100% it, but according to True Achievements, if you're not taking your time, it can take you somewhere between 25 to 30 hours. With that, let's move on to the final game of this video. It's the latest game in the series as of writing the script on the 9th of December and recording the narration on the 12th of December. But anyway, let's just finish this video. It's long enough. Hey look, it's Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. Another game I have a full series on. Links are below in the I'm pretty good right now. This game is absolutely fan-fucking-tastic. While the story was weaker in Yakuza Like a Dragon's, it had improved the combat. It had much improved the combat, adding the ability to move around during your turn, allowing for more control and reactiveness with dynamic follow-up attacks from the party members, and it made picking up weapons nearby much easier. This change in combat allowed you to be a lot more tactical, and I definitely felt like I was being a lot more tactical with my decisions compared to Yakuza Like a Dragon. Since you could now move around during combat, you could line up enemies to either hit multiple enemies at once with a single attack, or to knock an enemy into another enemy, dealing extra damage. You could even position yourself so that you could hit an enemy into a teammate, giving you another combo attack, allowing you to kill multiple Yakuza-shaped birds with a single swing from a kitted-out baseball bat. It also added new jobs such as Action Star, which was inspired by Bruce Lee, and I have to imagine Jackie Chan, a surfer instructor job that uses water attacks, Desperado, a cowboy-inspired job, and Geodancer, a hula dancing-inspired healing and support magic class. Did I mention this game is set in Hawaii? As for the side content, it went all out. They brought back the Pokemon-inspired stuff from Yakuza Like a Dragon and made it so much bigger. There's an entire sub-storyline and mini-games involving Pokemon-esque battles with Sujimons, in-game enemies, that you can collect and create a team of them. There's also a Crazy Taxi-inspired food delivery minigame that was very fun. There's an online dating minigame, a Pokemon Snap-inspired mode involving Sujimons, and a cocking Animal Crossings minigame. Yes, you heard that right. Dondoku Island is one of the most popular additions to this game, and it's really well made. You can easily sink hours and hours into this singular game mode that is completely optional, outside of a 15 to 20 minute or so tutorial that you can rush through pretty quickly on subsequent playthroughs. It replaces the very good business minigame in Yakuza Like a Dragon in the best way, by replacing it with something just as good, if not better. The game doesn't stop there. There's tons of other minigames that I haven't mentioned, including the procedurally generated dungeons. Think of like Persona's Mementos. That's in this game. They also brought back some classics like karaoke, darts, conquest, and the vocation quizzes from Yakuza Like a Dragon. The game is simply filled to the brim with mini-games. It's also filled with tons of sub-stories, side conversation that pop up as you run around the world, and you're able to use a segue while listening to music on a music app that Ichiban can unlock. There's also a friend system, where you can greet random people in Hawaii, which rewards you with items. There's also a ton of stuff to photograph for more awards. Party chats also return, as do party member sub-stories, table talks and more. It's just a massive, massive game. A guy who doesn't really like turn-based JRPGs says he loves this game, because it's got so much content and the gameplay is fun. He's been playing it all year and still hasn't beaten it. It's simply a massive, massive game with tons of stuff to do and experience. Oh, and there's tons of sub-stories for Kiryu in this game as well, as this game has 2 separate protagonists and 2 parties. It took me until the 20th of February to finish the story, and then a further 3 days to finish the rest of the base achievements for the game, and then another 5 days to finish the DLC achievements, bringing my total playtime to 160 hours, finishing this game completely on the 28th of February 2024. I loved this game a lot, and I mean a lot. It's easily my favourite game of 2024, and very well could be my favourite game of all time. I'm just not comfortable saying that yet because it could be recency bias. Now, unfortunately, there was a bit of controversy with this game before launch. Sega has been getting a bit greedy now that Yakuza's getting popular. They locked New Game Plus behind a paywall. I don't like this. I am not a fan of this. Don't do this. It sucks. New Game Plus shouldn't be a DLC. It should be a base part of the game. Sega, please do not damage or ruin these games with your shitty DLCs. And there we go. It's 10 to 2 in the morning and I finally finished the script. And in terms of narration, it's 5 in the morning. The script was 10 pages long, 6,600 words, 36,000 characters. It took me a long time to do this, and it took me about 5 days to edit this as well. I have a bunch of technical difficulties doing this video, as you can probably see throughout it. And it's why for some games I ended up using trailers instead of gameplay, and for others I did use gameplay even though the footage was bad, but the footage wasn't as bad for those games as it was for the other games. Some of the footage was really corrupted. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you've never played the Yakuza games before, go play them. Go play them. Start with Yakuza 0. It's often as cheap as £5 on sale. I even saw Yakuza Like a Dragon like around £10, maybe around that, during Black Friday. So check these games out, they are truly worth your time. So yeah, anyway, that's it. I'm rambling. See you next time. Ta-ra, bye-bye. Check out my other videos, my other series if you want to, if you don't have to. Alright, see ya.